Everyone, thank you so much for joining the maintenance breakout. We really have a treat for you today. So I want to welcome you. And just for some background on how we're going to do things, the meeting's being held in a meeting format. So as you can probably have already noticed, you will be able to manage your muting, your video, and all of that. Everyone's been muted upon entry, but as questions arise, you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask questions. And if you do have a question, please state your name and system in the chat box, and then we'll ask you to unmute. We're hoping that this helps everyone not talk all over one another. And please don't use the chat box for anything else other than chatting about the session. So I want to introduce you to our speaker, Halsey King. This is him here in the other box. I bet you most of you probably know him. He's a fleet maintenance consultant. He's been working with us here at CTAA on the maintenance side of things for many, many years. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without him, especially as it comes to our VMMI program. You'll see in the chat box that I've already put some information about that program and how you can join the program and become certified. So please look into that. And so here are the themes of our session. I will allow Halsey to take it away.
Starting right now?
Starting right now.
I don't see anyone yet.
Oh, they all took off their video, but they're here, I promise you.
Oh, okay. So, all right. I'm gonna start out. I guess we will have question and answers as we go along.
We will.
And I'd like to say hello to those of you who know me and we've worked with before. And for those of you who don't, I'd say welcome. And hopefully we'll meet in a different situation at a later time, eye to eye. Right now, this is kind of sort of like watching the difference between watching a ball game and being there and watching a ball game on television. There's definitely that intrinsic difference between the two. I'm going to talk about four major topics this morning and give you a time to respond and we can answer questions. Most of them are going to be developed out of our years of working nationwide with thousands of you, thousands of bus fleets in 46 states. And they're going to be popular issues, and we'll also probably end up a little bit at the bottom talking about electric buses, and they're making inroads into our fleets. The 5 elements of preventive maintenance that I always like to lead with are exactly those that we talk to folks around the country about, because we run into people from time to time who don't know exactly what all the elements are for an effective preventive maintenance program. Preventive maintenance is, as the words actually say, you're trying to prevent the vehicle from breaking down, from having ongoing series of catastrophes or problems and issues, as well as keeping the bus in service. And all that name implies is, in fact, preventing those things so that a driver can walk out to a bus, do their inspection, put the key in, turn it on, and go on their route. There's several different definitions of preventive maintenance. There's a historical data out there that tells me it actually came from someone who'd written a book in the military back in the 50s. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm just glad that it's here. And I see the effects of that nationwide as I visit different fleets throughout the country. You can tell they have an effective PM programs because you see their buses going down the road. You get a close eye on them when you're in working with the fleet, and you look at the numbers and the process. It's there. They have it. What does it make? What does it take to put together an effective PM program? Well, the first thing you've got to pay attention to is, in fact, the manufacturer's requirements. You are, in fact, in most states required to maintain the vehicle according to the manufacturer's requirements. It isn't something where we like to do this or that. It is, in fact, basis for the PM program to start from. We can add to that But let's look at those particular ones. A, let's say the chassis, and whether that chassis be from Ford or Chrysler, Chevrolet, GMC, whoever, they're going to give you a book, and in that book they're going to outline things that they suggest and sometimes require under warranties and situation that you do. Functions that they've learned over years and many, many miles that will contribute to a lower cost and a longer life. And that's what you're trying to achieve. That will be true of the chassis manufacturer. That will be true of the bus body manufacturer. When that bus arrives at your location, you should have a couple books or a disc or have access to the manufacturer's recommended practices for the adjustment of systems and components, B, the types and brands of materials that you may use and liquids that you may put into the vehicle. And the same is true of the bus body manufacturer. That'll be another separate manual, but you'd want to include the information they give you in as a daily function or a weekly function in your PM program. Some manufacturers out there, for example, recommend that you use baby powder to lubricate the window rubber seals on the vent windows on the top of your windows. Others say, no, stay away from that. Use silicone-based lubricant. And the difference between the two is the type of rubber that the manufacturer puts in their windows. All manufacturers do not use the same window rubber. And the reason for that as a seal, the reason for that is that they've tried and they know what works for them. So make sure you know and understand to use the right products on the vehicle. Because if you're using the wrong products, what will happen is that seal can dry out. And then before you know it, it's fallen on the wayside, it's fallen inside the bus, it's become brittle and it no longer serves a useful purpose. Using the right type of leaded or unleaded lubricant for the door locks, things of that nature. What oil are you putting in the wheelchair lift? All these things combined tell you that there's a difference between the products. And like I said, most of these manufacturers know which ones perform very well and may cost a little more to start with, but they see the advantages in being a longer life with less cost. The wheelchair lift, you know already, by federal law, 49 CFR 37 and 38 of the federal guidelines tells us that we must have a separate written program for the inspection and maintenance of your wheelchair lift. Now, most of you are already aware that when you get a wheelchair on a bus, even though it may be made by the same manufacturer as the other 6 buses in your fleet or 200 buses in your fleet, the technology and the product utilization on all of these wheelchair lifts can vary differently from wheelchair lift model to wheelchair lift model. Now, yes, there are some basic things. There are some torque tightening, bolt tightening measurement that you may need to take. There are some voltage checks you're going to have to do from time to time. You may have to go back and reset your lift cycle counter, do some tests on the play of pins and certain circuits. All that's part of and born out of the wheelchair lift book that comes with that particular wheelchair lift you're working with. I had one person say to me one time a few years ago, he says, Halsey, I've had as many as 6 different wheelchair models from the same manufacturer over the years. And I said, yes, and what's critical is that you make sure you're maintaining the wheelchair lift that you're maintaining on a certain subset of buses with the book that's made for that group, okay? The other thing that we're looking at is the other systems that come with your bus. There's no less than 3 different AC manufacturers that we use in the industry today. And so, yes, there are some basic rules of inspection, repair, and maintenance to the overall AC system. Each one of these manufacturers have a particular way or a particular use or a particular modifications to their system that they want you to use. And it's up to us to know and understand what those are, and then how do we write those out and put those into a PM program so that all of our people doing the inspection, service, and repair on our fleet know the differences, know that they exist, and use the same booklet when they do theirs. Now, this can spell its way out to a lot of different things, and some people are very diligent about doing that. I mean, even the seat suppliers, of which you're seeing a large growth in that industry right now. For now 25 years, we've pretty much relied upon 2 different manufacturers, maybe 3 different manufacturers to supply us with seats on our buses. But now we're seeing bus seat manufacturers coming from other countries. And of course, they have different products. Some use nylon, some use rayon, some use cotton. I mean, it's a complete different field out there. So yes, as we have our ability with our fleet to grow into different products and technology, we have to make sure that we are, as well as our maintenance teams, are growing with that. So yes, in developing your PM program, putting it together, these are just some of the basic 5 things that I recommend. And again, within this, there are things that you're going to have to really pay attention to. One of those is going to be federal and state standards. They vary greatly. Now, there's a lot of changes taking place right now, but basically your standards that we follow come to us in a particular book called 49 CFR. That's Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations. You'll find it at most libraries around the country. That is larger libraries that take the Federal Register every day. But if not, you can pick it up on the internet and print it out. It is what we need to know once the bus is given to us. And from a federal standpoint, that bus has been approved for sale and use in America. We'll get to the state standards in just a second. But when it comes to you, it's up to us to make sure that we do the things in there that the manufacturer wants us to do. That's certain torques and certain inspections, and also things in there that the federal government requires us to do. Your bus, when it comes to you, has been approved under what's called CFR 571. That's a licensed manufacturer giving you the bus. It's up to you to look into 49 CFR. And there's 2 particular subsections that I often cite. That'd be 49 CFR Part 393 and Part 396. 393 will give you the overall umbrella of what you need to know and do with regard to your PM program. It tells you in there, for example, in the code, that you have to have a fire extinguisher. It tells you in there that you have to have lights. I mean, obviously so. And quite a bit of the other information about your bus with regard to stopping distance. It'll tell you a lot in the CFR. And if you study this and take the precepts that's there, work them into your PM program, and give that information to the people who work as teams in your shop, you're going to fare much better. The CFR also is 396 is a section in there that deals with drivers and deals with some of the maintenance issues that we run into from time to time. For example, I've had young people come to me and say, can I become a certified brake inspector? Now that might be changing here soon because the CFR is changing, and it changes from time to time. Beginning every October 1st of every year, 49 CFR takes on some changes. And you as a fleet manager, or you as a person growing into those shoes, need to be aware that the federal code changes every October 1st. You can pick it up on the internet and find out and stay tuned to what it says, because the changes that are there are generally going to be involving you as a passenger carrying commercial vehicle. One of the things that the young person said to me is he heard that he can become brake certified. Well, there is information in CFR. You can go to 49 CFR Part 396.25 and learn how to become a certified brake inspector, okay? It's all spelled out there very easily. The next thing is state regulations. And state regulations vary quite a bit. Major changes, two things I'll talk about first. If you're operating your bus fleet in a state where they have a very active and aggressive inspection program by the state police or a state DOT or a state highway patrol agency, such as California Highway Patrol here in California, you will be inspected by a civilian employee of the state agency once a year. And they will come in and typically look at your fleet and give you a condition of your fleet. They'll look and see if you're operating diesel or gas fuel. They'll look at your facilities. And overall, they'll give you a satisfactory or an unsatisfactory rating. You may be getting that from your state DOT because it does operate in different ways. What's important is that you know the difference and be prepared for it, because all these folks are trying to do is to help you keep a safe, clean fleet on the road, and at the same time pay particular attention to what the state requires you to do. Now, sometimes these requirements are, and I know people say that seems silly, but they do vary from state to state. For example, in a school bus, which is a commercial vehicle, in the school bus in the state of California, you cannot have a trailer hitch. You can't pull a football team. You may have the team on the bus, but you can't pull a trailer behind it because you're not allowed to have a trailer hitch on a school bus. Now that may seem unusual, but that's the way California is. California will not allow you also to have a circular light that goes around and around on the top rear of the bus, which we do find in states like Kentucky and Colorado and Virginia, back in the Appalachian Mountains. The reason for that is that people back there, as they're traveling around the mountains in a 2-lane highway, they can see that light and they know there's a school bus coming around the bend. California does not want a white light shining to anybody in the back of the vehicle they're following, okay? So you can see there are some state regulations that do play a key part in your PM program. You need to be aware of what they are and put them into your PM program and look at them frequently, because once again, like the CFR, they do change, okay? And it is important, by the way, that the information you get and glean, you put this into your preventive maintenance program and give it to the people working in your shop. The laws sometimes change what we do. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, sometimes it's the economies of scale that change what we do. And we'll look at that in just a second. I wanted to talk also about training. The need right now for training in our industry is it just never ends. It virtually never ends. We're in a job classification or a vocation, however you want to see it. Once you attain that and you become a seasoned or certified maintenance person, the one advantage you have is you can go to work anywhere in the world. Now, I've done exactly that. And I've worked with people in fleets from Saudi Arabia right out to the edges of the Pacific Ocean, from Alaska all the way down to Zanzibar. I mean, everybody's always looking for someone with the trade knowledge who can take a vehicle and make it operate efficiently for a long time. The mechanical issues have changed on us. I mean, if you look around at where we've been, we've gone through the Stone Age, to the Wood Age, to the Diesel Age, to the Steam Age, to the Electric Age. Electric buses are up on our doorstep right now. They're not new. Electric vehicles have been in America since the turn of the century, for crying out loud. I can name 4 manufacturers who were making electric cars long before Henry Ford invented the assembly line, okay? Yeah, you had the Detroit Electric, which Henry Ford's wife used to drive. Oh yeah, all of that's come before us and we've dealt with it. We've learned how to adjust systems on buses with propane, how to adjust, inspect, and repair CNG systems. We're moving into electrical. And I should say, I do believe, having been an instructor for years, that's on the forefront of technology. if you have a young person going through school right now, unless they really love engines and they like to get their hands on large pistons and big crankshafts and work on big engines like Cummins 350s and such as that, hey, that's one thing, because that now has become, well, it's become a trade all into its own. We've completely moved out engine repair and engine overhauls in most shops across America. That has become something that's caused a big change in us, because now we focus more on preventive maintenance. And training is right there on our doorstep. So yes, if I had a young person, I would say to them today, go to school, but take 4 years of electrical and electronic, because that's where we're headed. We're coming in that all those vehicles are going to be landing at your doorstep. I'm putting together a 2-piece article right now for CTAA that goes into some of the history of the electric vehicle. And we're going to be naming some of them that's going to be coming in, and you might be seeing in the near future on the doorstep of your fleet. The weakest skill sets is not the ones we're looking for. People used to come into our industry, a lot of them from the military, and we'd show them how to adjust valves and how to run the timing, how to change plugs, points, and condenser, all of which have gone away. In fact, those tools are hanging on the walls of antique stores now, very expensive, I might add. The new technologies and new skill sets that we're going to require people of the future to have are going to be baseline in electrical. And you're going to see that if you stay in this industry, you're going to see us go to pure electric steering, pure electric brakes. Everything that you taught or were taught 30 or 40 years ago is going to be going away. In fact, your red toolbox is going to be shrink down to about maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. Let's go more, it'll be more of electrical diagnosis tools in there than anything else. We can, again, talk about that a little bit later in this discussion if you want. Better service. Better service trends are things that we're all seeking. How do we get through the maze of things that are handed to us once a new bus arrives at our shop? Many of you have nothing to do with that. You come to work one day and there's 10 new Fords sitting out in front, and they're from XYZ manufacturer, one you've never operated with. Let's say you get 10 new Champions out there, and you've always had Eldorados and Goshens. Well, now your training is going to have to be applied to that. You're going to have to now sort of reinvent part of being a manager of a fleet. And this is going to, over life, this will take you out of your toolbox and put you into the floor shop management arena. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because so many of you I've met, I don't know, later in years, who went to program, the VMMI program back in the, I don't know, the 80s, for crying out loud. And now you are in fact fleet managers. Now you are doing the things that we told you would be doing. And yes, the technology's changed. Yes, you find yourself now writing a PMMI program. Yes, you now being concerned about the level of skills of the mechanics working for you. And yes, your boss is going to ask you from time to time, what is the cost per mile for the tires you're buying? What is the cost per mile of the fuel or the electricity we're using? What is the cost per mile for the parts that you're buying? What is the cost per mile for the labor we're using? All of those, by the way, are in fact standard numbers that we've used and standard protocols we've used in fleet for well over 75 years. If you in fact know the answer to those questions, you become a more valuable person, not only to your organization, but people outside of your organization. A fleet maintenance manager should know several things when someone walks up and says, hey, I see that you have XYZ Fords or Chevys and you've been operating them for 10 years. What is your cost per mile on those vehicles? You should be able to spit that number out real quick. You should know, with modern day computerized technology and analytics, you should know the difference now between your Goodyear tires and your Firestone tires. You should know the difference in operation and maintenance between your Chevys and your Fords. And that's what makes a new and a good manager, knowing that. Knowing which one of your techs working for you are good at gears, are good at engine repair, and which ones are good at electrical repair. Use their skills to your best advantage to ensure that you're providing a safe, clean, and reliable vehicle, which is in operation at the proper dollar level. Once where you get into where you're going to fleet management meetings, that's going to be a question that other fleet managers you're going to run into as you're standing there drinking coffee or meeting and hearing some speaker from some organization talk. You'll find yourself in talking about tires, engines, horsepower, cars, trucks, and buses. And all of this is the main recipe that we all are always looking for. We're there to learn information, but we're also there to share information. And being a better service, you will walk away from that meeting learning a lot. One of the things that you'll learn is that when those new buses do come to your shop, you got a job ahead of you that's going to take you a few days. You need to call your local dealer and find out who your Ford service engineer is. Write down that person's number, write down that person's name, and give them a call. Tell them who you are and why you're calling. You just received a certain model vehicle. You need all the information about that vehicle you can get. And since you're my local Ford service engineer, I'd like to know when you're going to come over and visit me in my fleet. Another one that you might want to call also is the people who made the AC system on your bus. Call them, find out who the local service agent is, talk to them, make sure they know who you are, make sure that they know what model AC unit you have on your bus. In other words, get familiar with all of the bus suppliers and make sure they know who you are. You have immediate contact with them because you are going to be tied to these people for an infinite amount of time while your bus is still running. You don't want that information where you got to go look for it right at the time when you got a rear main seal leaking on your spare bus and the dispatch is beating you up needing that bus and you're underneath the bus trying to repair a rear main seal. Now you got to call Ford to get that part number. Get it up front. Establish this relationship and nurture it, because next year, just about everything we've talked about so far is going to take on a little bit of change. Federal requirements are going to change. State requirements may change. Ford no longer produces that brake fluid. Now you got to buy the amber stuff. General Motors moved away from using diesels. They're using their new diesel, but next year they may not make it. All of these things you need to know in order to not only work on your bus fleet now, but project out what you're going to be doing in the near term and long term. A couple other things, and I will knock off here. Make sure that you find out who that go-to person is, establish those relationships, and always request any updates from that person, any recalls, and any TSBs. Now, again, that might be from your engine manufacturer, your bus manufacturer, your chassis manufacturer, all of your systems and component manufacturers that you deal with. Get the latest information in your hand as you can directly from the manufacturer, because they're the ones that's going to control it. There are outside accesses to information that you can get and will use from time to time. And you should in fact do that. But remember that your bus is coming from one or two different primary manufacturers. A secondary manufacturer has put on a wheelchair lift or maybe seats in the bus. So you want to arm yourself with all the information you need, develop those relationships, but find out along the way to keep yourself aware and conversant with federal standards, any and all TSBs, any and all fresh information you can get your hands on, okay? So I would like to now turn it over to any questions or any concerns that we can try to help you with, if that would be the case. hoping I'm not the only person in the room.
You are not, Halsey. If you have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat box, or even better yet, since we have a smaller group, you're welcome to just unmute yourself and share.
Well, if we don't have one yet, maybe I can spur some questions along. What I've found out the last couple of days is dealing with standards, and in particular, dealing with standards of the electrical systems on new buses. Like I said, it's coming at you. 2 weeks ago, I read on the internet where some of the bus companies and car manufacturers in Europe were picking cars up off the road that were electric powered, and they were dipping them in swimming pools or lakes or streams. Lo and behold, I look in the National Fire Protection Associates manual and it recommends the same thing. So don't be surprised if your neighbor's car, which is an electric car, is you find a crane out in front of the house after it's burning on fire. They're dipping it in the swimming pool in his backyard. That's going on. Why is it happening? It's happening because we don't have a lot of standards yet that are in the neighborhood. It seems that we've got several people who are building electric vehicles, and they're using their own schematics, their own wiring system in some cases, but the question hasn't been answered yet, and it'll be part, hopefully, in what we're putting together for you in the next couple of weeks to read. Are any of you already operating electric vehicles? Can I get a response? None? Yes, okay, Tim. What type of a vehicle do you have? Are they cutaways, straight van, minivans?
So I unmuted myself, Halsey. I work with V-Trans in Vermont, and we have electric buses on the urban side that you're familiar with at Green Mountain Transit. And they do have electric vehicles in revenue service. They're the heavy duty type electric vehicles. They're,
okay.
They're 40 footers. They've had some challenges with the hills in Vermont, as you might imagine, but they are working well. We did receive some low-no awards, and we're going to be purchasing some cutaways as well. That's like the next phase.
Okay.
We got 4 low-no awards, and the first phase was Green Mountain Transit, and those are in revenue service, but we have more coming. I did have one additional question: is there any plans to do remote learning for the VMMI, Halsey, in the future? Do you know?
We're looking at that right now. There are some questions with regards to the process. You know, many of you know, I've worked with General Motors a few years ago. We tried to do exactly that. We were at GM's studios and outside the skirts of Detroit, and we put together some computer learning, and it just, either we were too early at it or the interest level wasn't there. Now this does, I will admit, fall on the heels of some of the early experiences with having computerized maintenance programs in a maintenance environment. When I came back from working in Arabia, everybody had an iPad. I mean, no, everybody had a small computer in their maintenance office, but some people didn't buy it. They'd rather do things by paper and pencil. And so therefore the computer lied dormant in some arenas for years and years. But I think we're growing into that area such now that General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler have reviewed that. They moved into a lot of those different training programs, and possibly we will too. It becomes difficult for maintenance people because traditionally we work with our eyes and our hands. And I've often stated this, for those of you who've been to my class know this, it's hard to explain to someone how to use a feeler gauge if they've never used a feeler gauge and adjust the valves on a Volkswagen or a Ferrari Testarossa. If you don't know what the full feel should be, the tension should be, it's hard for that to be explained by a teacher. It's also difficult to get the point across from time to time to people who are not familiar with certain tools that we use. I mean, how do you explain a crescent wrench to someone over a telephone? And our tools do vary from time to time as technology does. So we're looking at how we can do that. That would actually move us from a generation of people that work with our hands and our eyes into more of a technology education program. Yes, we're at least part of the VMMI can be done that way. Yes. The regulation part's very simple. The developing PM program, yeah, we can do that, but we can't get down to the infinite parts, and that's what we're sort of struggling with right now.
Thank you.
And by the way, good for you on operation of your electric buses. I want to make sure that people don't walk away from this interview with a disdain toward electric. As I said earlier, it took us a while to move from a horse and buggy into gasoline, and gasoline into electric and diesel, and on up the challenge. So there's going to be challenges, there always are. But the simplification of these processes and putting them into a bus, and we've seen this come along for quite a few years. We've talked about it in VMMI. Those of you who've been to VMMI know back in the 90s when Chevrolet came out with electric steering for their Chevy Nova, everybody was saying, well, it'll never work. Well, it did work, and here we are, everyone's using it. I've often had people come to me and say, well, you know, such things as, I don't know, radial tires will never work in America. It's what they told me in 1967 when I bought my first set of radial tires from Sears for my Oldsmobile. And I'd stop at a red light and someone would notoriously come up and roll their window down and say, hey, buddy, all your tires are flat. I'd say, well, these are radial tires and they don't require as much air. And by the time I'd get into explaining it, the light would turn green and he would be leaving. And that's the way it is right now. This technology is coming to us in warp speed in some cases, but it's coming to us in other cases where we have a hard time recognizing it. You're going to have a point to where at some point, even on your engines that are still fueled by liquid, whichever, diesel, gas, or whatever, you're going to have electric fuel pumps, electric steering, electric brakes. That's all coming to you. And if you make the choice to go to full electric, it'll be there too. I must add that the people that are making the large 40-foot transit buses, I do believe are doing a marvelous job at that. They've taken that technology in the last 20 years and just proved to the rest of the world that, hey, we can go millions of miles and it is effective and it does work. Freightliner's got 20 new models coming out. I just read in Engineering Magazine. The new model that come out is it's got a lot of air dam resistance on it, disc brakes on all four corners, electric motor drive. Hey, it's happening to us. So what gains you make, you're to be applauded for that. And I do applaud you for it.
Do you have any feedback, Halsey, on some of the cutaways, the smaller electric?
That's what we're researching that right now. And like I said, I'm putting together right now for the electric bus, the outline for a couple different articles. Well, it's going to be one article in two pieces. Number one, I'll go ahead and share this with you. I don't have it with me, but I'll give you part number one. Is going to be who's making electric vehicles right now that we should have access to. Of course, that depends upon how big are your vehicles. Los Angeles Access here in LA he's got, at last count that I knew of, about 700 small Chrysler type minivans. And then he's got the smaller Dodge bus that he's having made in Texas right now that hold a lot of passengers. And but none of his so far are electric. But we do find the growth is there. It's going to be more and more. So therefore, the first question is to ask is, if you move away from gas and diesel or propane or alternative fuels, what are you going to buy? Well, you got to look at what's on the market. And then you got to fit and get some information about the actual cost. Electric buses aren't free any more than they don't require maintenance. I've heard people say to me, well, buy the electrics, you don't have to maintain them. Wait a minute, they still have brakes, they still have coolant, they still have electrical power going through all those wires that's on that bus. And as I said earlier on, or you've heard me say over the years, the weakest skill set of most technology people out there today and our vocation is the understanding of electrical systems, Ohm's law and the theory of electricity. We need to do more with educating our folks about that. So if you've decided that you're going to buy a certain vehicle and you decided that you want to have that vehicle delivered to you, the next question is, how are you going to support the infrastructure? Chances are you're going to have some wiring done at your facility. The garage may not be set up for the amount of power you're going to need or the charging stations you're going to want to put in. And then you're going to go into the next part is going to be actually acquiring the vehicles. And a big component of that's going to be safety. Most all of these vehicles that I've looked at and read about or even think about myself have enough power to kill a maintenance person. There's no question about it. Depending on the situation, we have people who can get electrocuted from the very vehicle that they're working on. So that has to be a big component. And I'm well aware that a lot of people are in fact doing that nationwide. They're adding into the education and they're using what's available to them to educate their maintenance on safety. So we're going to have those elements in there. And then we're going to get down to the second part of that. It's going to be, what are the maintenance requirements? What are the driver's requirements? What do we do when the vehicle gets old and how do we get rid of the batteries? That's a problem right now. What are we going to do with these spent batteries? They're expensive, they're large, they're not easy to handle, and even harder to get rid of. So there's some questions that we're going to put into that article, and it's going to come out in two pieces, more than likely over the next 6 months, okay?
Thank you.
Bob, you have anything? How about G. Gallant? Come on, there's got to be some question. You didn't come all this way just to get no answers. Well, then with that, let's go on to another subject that maybe you haven't considered yet. Or if you haven't, it would be something that you'll be looking forward to, and that is you becoming a maintenance manager. The reason why, and I'll talk about this, because the reason why we actually put VMMI together, that's Vehicle Maintenance Management and Inspection. Let me give you just a little history about that so that you may want to reflect on what you've gone through or take a look at what you may want in the future. Because just as a person has the maintenance skills to work here in America on cars, trucks, and buses and decide one day that he wants to go to work on vehicles in Zanzibar, or as we've done in the past, the Middle East, or if you've done in the past, maybe the Philippines. I mean, these jobs are being handed and advertised on the US State Department. You can go there and look every day. There's all kinds of jobs that foreign companies are looking to fulfill. And sometimes you'll find maintenance jobs, and sometimes you'll find technical jobs, and from time to time, you will find a request for a fleet maintenance manager. We looked 23 years ago when we first developed the VMMI program. We did it with the anticipation that people could learn from it and go back to their fleets and look at what they needed to do in order to make it more efficient and actually answer the question of, what is my cost per mile? Whoever you are around the world today, if you are a person who either owns a large fleet of cars, trucks, and buses, or you're a corporation who owns them and you're the manager who's looked at to manage these cars, trucks, and buses, you're going to get down to the very granular activity someday when someone walks from the higher level floor of the building you're in and asks these questions. How many mechanics do you need? When are you going to buy new vehicles? Are you considering trading and going to one of these other new tire suppliers? You know, since 1997, we have all seen the tremendous growth in the tires being sold in America now, with names on them we haven't recognized before. It'd be, I don't know, 2 nickel, 10 nickels, or 5 echelons. I mean, we're seeing tires with names that are not Firestone, Goodyear, Bridgestone, the traditional names. And in all cases, they offer something to us that we may want to investigate and we may find a benefit of. And so therefore, part of the things that we do as a fleet manager is we do a lot of testing. We do a lot of verification. We find out if we buy something, does it actually work? Does the soap that we buy for our hand washing, does the soap that we buy for our automatic machine out there do a better job? Is the suffocant ability of that soap really good to clean off the diesel fuel that's accumulation on the back of the bus as it goes down the road? All these things come to us as a fleet manager. And when you get to that point where you want to become the fleet maintenance manager, you will start to leave your toolbox and you'll start to move into that whereby you'll be working with different skill sets and they will come to you. You'll make mistakes and they will be a growing part of what you do. But at the same time, you grow with the organization and you get to one day to where you're saying to yourself, you know, when I left here as a fleet tech and I went into fleet management on the lower level as a shop manager or the chief of a shift, and now I'm the director, and the organization has grown to where we're not only a 30 vehicle operation, we operate 15,000 vehicles and we're in 6 different cities in 4 different states. We are now a large corporation, and I'm no longer am I in charge of 6 buses and 3 maintenance techs. I'm in charge of 300 maintenance techs, and I got a $10 million budget. All of a sudden, this doesn't come to you. You grow into that. And if you have those skill sets to necessarily want you to go into the business world from the business side, then what you'll learn there is that all of the things that you've had and learned in your past as a technician are going to really start to pay off, because now you'll be able to recognize the skill sets of the group of 300 people working under your control. Now you'll be able to move them into spots where, as I said earlier, will give you greater benefit to apply their learning and their experience to what you need to make the fleet more effective. You'll learn the price of $1. The price of $1 and how much you're spending of that dollar on the 6 known cost items that we all as maintenance managers track. I don't care, you can be a person in charge of a fleet of ambulances, you can be in charge of a fleet of taxis or a fleet of school buses. There are 6 items out there, 6 components that you're going to track as a manager. That's going to be your labor. You need to know what you're getting for the 40 hours that most fleet techs are putting in at your shop. I'll share this with you from around the country. In the 23 years in the VMMI program, we know that most fleets have an average somewhere around 73% of efficiency. Some are more, some are less, but 73%. And you need to know what that number is as a fleet manager. And of course, you're going to be expected to grow from that. You're going to need to know the price on the parts you're going to be buying. You're going to have several different parts available to you. You could be able to buy remanufactured parts, which are almost new, or you buy new parts, which are far from being what used to be called, well, I don't know that we use the phrase anymore, but rebuilt. Time is money. And when a part becomes old and worn out, we send it to one of two different people, either a rebuilder or someone that's going to take that vehicle and remanufacture it. And there's a lot of difference. There's a lot of difference in what they're doing. There's a lot of difference in the cost. And as a manager, you need to know what that cost difference is. And when you look at a vehicle in your eyes and you look at it and you count the numbers of parts in there that you're going to replace over its life cycle of 4, 6, 8, or 10 years, steering pumps, wiper motors, wheel cylinders, transmissions, clutches, if you will, radiators, generators, alternators, all these have a possibility of being rebuilt or remanufactured. You as a manager need to know the difference, need to know the advantage, and need to know the cost. As I said earlier, tires is the third one here, and you have the availability now to a lot of different tires coming out. Tire technology, when we compare it to 40 years ago, it's light years ahead of where we used to be. We used to have a tire that we used to call it the rain tire back in the 60s. And it did a very good job of kicking the water out from under the tire tread so that you wouldn't ride down the street on a pool of water. But by the same token, that same tire had to behave in the conditions where the highway is hot, like 115 degrees as it is over in Maricopa County or Phoenix, Arizona today. We need to make sure that vehicle tire has a good grip, a good stopping distance, and we get wear out of it that's better than the next tire that we used to buy. And you as a manager need to know that. So you're looking at labor, parts, and tires. How about your fuel? If there's anything that's changed over a lifetime of being a fleet manager, fuel has changed now, and it's changing more in the future. And it changes your fleet. When we took the gasoline, as we've all used, and took lead out of the gasoline, we also increased, at the same time, we increased the life cycle of the spark plug, because it was always the lead deposits that caught itself on the bottom of the spark plug that rendered it bad. So we took the lead out of gasoline, and I've had fleet managers tell me over the recent years, oh, I don't change spark plugs. Used to do them all the time, but now we do spark plugs at 50,000 miles. Why? Because the gas no longer has lead in it. We're taking the sulfur out of diesel fuel. Pound by pound, we're removing more sulfur now than we ever had. And it's something that's good because we didn't need it in the first place. As you know, you may remember, depending on your age and where you were in life at the time, but we got sued by the Canadians years ago because the diesel buses and trucks that were depositing large carbon balls on the streets of Los Angeles were being picked up by the prevailing winds, and that carbon would be blown up into the clouds where it would be mixed with a little bit of moisture, and it would drop over eastern Canada as carbon or acid rain. And it would start to poison their lakes and eat holes in their trees. As we started to take the carbon out, we started to recognize or lessen the sulfur and drop the carbon content. We started to find out also that our engine lasted longer. You know, for 100 years, I believe it is, people have always told me that propane is the cleanest burning fuel that you can get. And I have found that over life to be true, both when I was a mechanic, both when I was a shop manager, and both when I was a shop teacher here in San Diego City schools. You take apart an engine that's been fueled on propane, hey, it's like opening a Rolex watch. You look inside, it's perfectly clean after all these years. There's no carbon, there's no sulfur. So when you get those two out, you're better. But understanding that whole activity, dealing with fuels, you will learn as a manager and you'll learn how to take advantage of it. Then you'll probably move into electrical at some point in time. And all this envelope needs to be applied there, okay? The next is you're going to be buying vehicles. You've got to know, again, all the others, your labor, tires, fuel, parts, and now the vehicles themselves. Which one are you going to buy? Well, if you've been a manager around the fleet for a while and you paid attention to your own analytics that come to you off of your computer, you already know which tire gives you the better tire life at the least cost. You already know where to put your best maintenance techs to get your advantage out of them. You already know you're not really getting a lot ahead by buying rebuilt parts because you're operating a paratransit bus that is viewed by many to be on demand. I mean, when grandmother needs a paratransit bus, if it's a dial-a-ride situation, she calls in, she expects that bus to be in front of her house at 7:05 in the morning, and she's sitting in 2 feet of snow in Pittsburgh. She wants that bus to be there. You may find that you can't rely on parts that are just inexpensive, that move fast. So you may find over your lifetime that we operate better with brand new parts or we operate better with remanufactured parts, okay? So that's where these things come to you as a manager, and your learning experience then really starts to graduate you into those areas where you next find that you have the time to go to the big bus and truck meetings, the Louisville Truck Show. If you haven't been to the Louisville Truck Show, it's like going to a large airport, Atlanta, and every square foot of it is covered by trucks and components. And I don't know, if you're in the car business, you go to Las Vegas coming up in a couple of weeks there for the SEMA show. Once you go to these, that heightens and embraces and in fact enhances your ability as a fleet manager, because you now see all the new tools that you can work with, all the new equipment you can buy for your maintenance shop. It's virtually it's a Christmas time for fleet managers to go to these, but you find you have the time to do it, okay? So growing into a fleet manager is what the intent of the VMMI program has always been. And it's something that for CTAA, it's quite unique in this environment, because we are the only fleet organization in the United States that even provides for this. I don't know anyone else in this business, in the bus business, that provides a VMMI program. Of course, there are trucking organizations that, yes, they have seminars and they put on training for their members. But we used to do that at APTA years ago, but it all flew by the wayside. So as an organization, CTAA is quite apart and quite ahead of what we see in our counterparts throughout the United States. And we have over the years, it is astounding. I was talking to someone the other day, an East Coast manager for one of the larger contractors, and I said, I'm glad to meet you. I was wondering who was the East Coast manager for this company. And he said, Halsey, you seem to forget, we met 19 years ago when you did the VMMI program in Memphis. Well, I don't have a good memory of that. I can't remember all 10,000 people that come through the program, but I'm glad you can see the results because you've worked your way from being an attendant at VMMI to the East Coast manager of one of the largest private contractors in the country. So we know it has net results and we're glad to do it. And as I said earlier, Tim, we probably will start to do it in some electrical way, some way on the computer, so a lot of it can be shared easier. Any questions so far? Got to be another question. Don't get the cat, get your tongue now. Come on, come on. Oh, MJN, how about MJN? Come on, give me a question here. Let's make it worth our while. Come on. I don't have everyone's initials or name before me here, so I'm not sure who all is on the program here today. But I did see one or two names, and I don't see them here. Let's see. CTAAs. Do we have any other folks from CTAA? Oh, Carlos is here. Mike B. Ackers. Leslie Pedroza. Paul Burns. Paul, come on. I see you got chrome rims for your bus here. What was number 6? Number 6 was the shop itself. I'm sorry, I missed that, but you're good in bringing that up. 6 is going to be the shop itself, the facilities. And that's quite important these days because, as you might expect, a lot of you over the years have gone through major change. You've gone from a small fleet with just a small, I don't know, 2-door shop to a large, expansive organization. And so you've grown through that. And as a manager, you need to be able to provide for the people working with you in the shop environment. We've seen the worst and the best. We've had the opportunity here lately to work with some of the larger organizations around the country and helping them to build garages. Gardena, California, being one of the latter ones. They've got a facility out there now as the size of some small airports in the nation, but they're going to grow into it because of the anticipated growth. But when I first started working with them, they had a 4 take. We're currently at 2.5 days. And that's with, by the time we give the examination and you're out the door, it's about 2.5 days. We're going to be I see my internet connection is unstable here. We're going to be in Louisville with the VMMI program, and we're trying to shrink it down to a 2-day program. But it is going to be still eye to eye, as I said earlier, because a lot of what we do in the maintenance environment just you can't teach it. It has to be show and tell, if you will. But you all are probably, some of you, not all of you, but some of you right now are probably going through the growth of getting CARES money or CARES Act money, where you may be laying the foundation for a larger shop. Whatever the case may be, you've got to make sure as a fleet manager that the tools and equipment you give the people to work with have to be of the generation of the bus. As I said earlier, the tools of most of us, and when I came into the industry, all the tools I worked with are down at antique stores. Timing lights and dwell meters. I mean, that's all passé now, unless you own a 57 Chevy at home. And some of you probably do. The thing about it is, as a manager, when that new bus shows up in front of your shop, whatever it has on it, you need to buy the tools and the equipment to make sure that you can accurately service it and have a garage that is adequate to work in. We've worked with people who work in a shop no bigger than a concrete slab in the middle of a cotton patch in the southern part of the United States. And to go to that and then to work with people in large urban facilities like Kings County and Seattle, Washington, fantastic garages there. The new garages at Princeton and Miami and down in Florida, the Princeton facility there with the bus companies there. They're a long way from working on a bus in the middle of a concrete slab in a cotton patch. But most of you are now moving into that. And I would hope that when you do move into the opportunity where you get to lay out the architecture for your bus shop, make sure you have a seat at the table to work with the architects. Because most architects I know do not know where the engine is located in a bus. They don't know the difference between backing a bus into a shop and pulling it in frontwise. They don't know how far they need to be away to build a wall from a bus, because sometimes when we go to pull the rear wheels off, we don't have enough room there to pull the wheels off because the wall is too close. They sometimes put the exhaust extractors at the wrong end of the vehicle shop, so no one ever uses them because we bring our buses in forward rather than back them in. So if you're going to be the maintenance manager and in the future, you're going to build a shop, make sure you have a seat at the table, because they need to know from you how it is you conduct the work, how it is your work crews find yourselves working around things, because otherwise you can get into a shop that, because of its very layout, causes you to have to work around, and it causes you time and effort and hours. So do make sure, Paul, that you're there if you're going to build a new shop. Mike, you got something for me? Carlos? We have 5 minutes left, okay. I thought I had a question there from Carlos. Where did it go? Or Mike?
I'm happy to read it to you, Halsey.
Okay.
Okay. How is CTAA and yourself looking into training and acquiring future technicians? I am sure that all the managers on here are hurting for help and not finding many techs out there. We train in-house, but how do we attract new people in our industry?
That's probably one of the most important questions that I've answered in the last 23 years. I think I said earlier, when I came into the industry, I worked on Cadillacs, foreign cars, and moved into bus. And bus has taken me all around the world. But the same problems exist now. Back then, 25 years ago, people were looking at maintenance because they said, oh, that's a dreary job. I don't want to go in and get my hands dirty. It's not much pay. And to some extent, it's the same way today, although we have completely changed. We don't talk about the way that it used to be as much as we talk about the future and the way it's going to be. Technology today is coming out of well, for us in the bus industry, we're getting our new technology from places like PACCAR. PACCAR builds a couple trucks in the country. They're called Peterbilt and Kenworth. My good friend Lyle Cummins, I've brought to Lyle to audiences around the country to answer that same question. Where do we get maintenance people? We have to actually work at it. We have to go out and beat the bushes. We need to go to community colleges near us that have an automotive trades program, put our name in the hat. We need to make sure that they know we're here and that we have good jobs available. One of the things that separate fleet mechanics, and it's very important to know and understand this when you're talking to some young people who you're trying to recruit. Let them know that there's a vast difference between us and the commercial mechanic that works at a car dealer or an independent shop. We offer, as fleet techs, we offer long-term insurance, we offer retirement programs, we offer vehicles in a clean shop it's well littered with the tools you need to do the job. We'll give you 2 weeks of vacation after the first couple of years. Now, by the time you got 20 years in, you're probably heading toward 3 or 4 weeks of vacation every year. You don't have to quit this job and go to that job. A lot of the commercial mechanics out there today working at dealerships, you will find, if you talk to them, that they've worked for 6 or 8 different dealerships or independent garages over the last 6 years. You as a manager have to realize that mechanics always follow the dollar. Even though it might just be a quarter by the time they get the job and start to work, because the job they're talking about and working with now pays $1 more, but it cost them 75 cents to get there because they had to move farther or go farther to get there. And the benefit package they used to have is going away. So as fleet technicians, we have more to offer, number one. Number two, you have to make it actual. You need to go out there and beat the buses. And the best place to start is any of the local community colleges near you that have an automotive trades, or the private schools that the same way. Make sure your name is in the list as somebody recruiting people, okay? I see we have about a minute left. I'm glad you invited me here. I've had a good time. Hope I've answered some of the questions you came to get. And if nothing else, we'll see you at CTAA in November and go through the VMMI program for a couple of days. And with that, I'd like to thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Halsey. This has been recorded, and so at the end of our time together, likely in the coming weeks, we will put all of the recordings together. That way you can have kind of a takeaway, share it with the rest of your team. And if you obviously didn't go to some of our other breakouts, those recordings will be available to everyone who attended the conference as well. As you can see in the bottom here in our chat feature, I put the link to our next session, so we will see you over there. Thank you all again.